The pastor's daughter is pregnant. Women shook their heads in disbelief. Men murmured quietly, and Pastor David, unaware of the storm, still preached about discipline and purity. The story begins on a bright Sunday morning in Victoria Island. The church was buzzing with polished cars pulling into the gated compound, worshippers dressed in their finest clothes, and ushers moving briskly to keep everything in order. Pastor David, tall, commanding, and with a smile that carried weight, stood by the entrance, greeting members as they arrived. Behind him, his wife Grace, graceful, poised, always perfect, held the arm of their only child, Aisha. Aisha was 19, quiet, but with a beauty that drew whispers. Everyone in the church admired her. She was the pastor's daughter, untouchable, a symbol of purity in a place where image was everything. But inside Aisha's eyes, a storm was building, one she hadn't found the courage to speak of. The whispers began one ordinary afternoon, first among the choir girls. Aisha had missed 2 consecutive rehearsals, and her frame, once slim, looked fuller. In Lagos, secrets never stayed buried for long. By the 3rd Sunday, rumors ran through the church like wildfire. The pastor's daughter is pregnant. Women shook their heads in disbelief. Men murmured quietly, and Pastor David, unaware of the storm, still preached about discipline and purity. That day, Aisha sat in the front row, her hand pressed against her stomach, her eyes heavy with fear. She knew the whispers weren't just rumors. They were the truth. Her parents confronted her that night. The house in Victoria Island was immaculate, with marble floors and spotless glass doors, but the air was heavy. Aisha, her father said, his voice measured, "Tell us the truth. Who is responsible?" Aisha's lips trembled, but no words came. Her mother pressed harder. "Aisha, we can handle anything, but you must speak." Tears slipped down Aisha's face. She shook her head slowly. "I can't." Her silence was louder than a confession. Pastor David's face hardened. His daughter, the church's pride, was about to destroy everything. But Aisha couldn't bring herself to tell the name, because the truth would break their home beyond repair. As the days passed, pressure mounted. The church board called an emergency meeting. Some suggested Aisha should be sent abroad quietly until after the birth. Others whispered about suspension from choir and leadership roles. Pastor David stood silent, his authority trembling under the weight of scandal. At home, Grace pleaded with Aisha to talk. "People think it's a boy from church. Is it someone older? Someone from your school?" Aisha kept her silence, avoiding her mother's eyes. In Lagos, appearances were currency, and their families was crumbling. But Aisha knew the cost of speaking the truth would be worse than any rumor. The tension grew unbearable. One evening, Pastor David stormed into Aisha's room. "You will not disgrace me. You will speak now." His voice thundered, but Aisha's fear was greater. She looked at him, her face pale, her hands trembling. "If I say it, you will hate me forever." Her father's chest rose and fell. "I demand to know who ruined my daughter." Aisha closed her eyes, silent again. Pastor David left the room, shaking with anger. For the first time in years, the man who commanded thousands in church couldn't control his own house. And Aisha knew her silence was a shield, but also a weapon. The city didn't sleep. Social media picked up the story. Pastor's daughter pregnant, refuses to name father. Memes spread. Gossip blogs speculated. Some blamed Lagos boys, others hinted at politicians. Church members texted each other secretly. Every Sunday, Aisha sat quietly as the congregation stared at her stomach more than the pulpit. Her friends withdrew. Some laughed behind her back. And in the quiet of her room, Aisha felt the walls closing in. Her world was shrinking, but still, she would not speak the name. Because it wasn't just a secret, it was a wound that cut too close to home. Her mother broke down first. One night, Grace entered Aisha's room, sat on the bed, and held her hand. "Baby, please. Is it someone we know?" Is it someone from this church? Aisha's tears fell silently. Grace's grip tightened. You're protecting him, aren't you? Aisha nodded faintly, and that nod was enough to break her mother's heart. Grace left the room, her chest heavy, her eyes wet. She realized her daughter's silence wasn't stubbornness, it was fear. But fear of what? Grace began to watch closely, connecting dots. And the more she noticed, the more her stomach turned. The turning point came on a quiet evening. Aisha sat in the living room, staring blankly at the TV when the front door opened. A familiar figure stepped in, one Aisha couldn't meet eyes with. He smiled warmly at Grace, greeted Pastor David, and ruffled Aisha's hair before disappearing upstairs. The moment was brief, but heavy. Grace's eyes darted to Aisha's face, pale, frozen, lips trembling. And in that instant, Grace knew. The father of Aisha's unborn child wasn't an outsider. He was inside their home, inside their family circle. A truth so poisonous, Grace could barely breathe. But Grace said nothing that night. Instead, she watched her daughter more closely. Watched how Aisha stiffened whenever he entered the room. How she avoided being left alone with him. How her silence wasn't rebellion, but survival. Grace began losing sleep. The perfect life she built in Victoria Island was collapsing. Her daughter was carrying a truth that could shatter them all. And Grace had to decide, protect the family's image or confront the monster under her own roof. The night Grace connected the dots, she couldn't sleep. She remembered how Ken, Pastor David's younger brother and the church's operations manager, had gradually become a fixture in their home over the past year, while his Lecky apartment was being renovated. Ken charmed everyone. He was the funny uncle who brought jollof to choir practices and slipped crisp notes to ushers for transport. Grace sat at the edge of her bed, fists pressed to her mouth to keep from sobbing. She went to Aisha's room and sat in the dark, listening to her daughter's breathing. When Aisha stirred, Grace whispered, "Is it him?" The silence felt like a confession. Aisha's voice cracked. "If I say it, Mommy, it will destroy everything." Grace pulled her closer. He already did. In that moment, a new resolve formed inside her, the kind that doesn't shout, only sharpens. In Lagos, image was protection. Tonight, truth would be their shield. Grace reached for her phone and typed a note to herself, gather evidence. Don't accuse without proof. Protect Aisha at all costs. She locked the screen, kissed Aisha's forehead, and stood. The perfect picture had cracked. Grace decided she would be the one to break the frame. Grace started quietly. The housekeeper, Yemisi, had worked with them for 4 years, a careful woman who avoided trouble but noticed everything. In the kitchen, while chopping peppers, Grace asked softly, "Has Ken Uncle gone into Aisha's room at night?" The knife paused, then resumed. "Madam, I don't put mouth for family matter." Later, she checked the security camera logs. Aisha often turned cameras facing the hallway toward the wall for privacy when guests visit, he'd joked. She pulled Wi-Fi logs, seeing Ken's phone connected outside Aisha's room at odd hours. Still, she needed more. That evening, she changed the angle of small nanny cam hidden in a picture frame Aisha kept on her desk. She told Aisha in a low voice, "If he tries anything, you don't have to be brave. You only have to be safe." Aisha nodded, terrified but less alone. Lagos nights outside their compound glittered like a promise. Inside, Grace was building a case, quiet, careful, relentless. Ken noticed changes. He noticed everything. He teased less, his eyes watched more. Later, he cornered Aisha by the staircase. "You're making this difficult," he murmured, smile fixed. "Say the father is one of your campus boys. Everyone will move on. I'll even help you pay him to lie." Aisha's throat closed. Ken's eyes hardened. "You think your mother can fight me? I built this church's book of contacts. I know where the money flows." She pulled away, heart racing, ran upstairs, locked the door, and texted her mother. "He's trying to control the story." Grace came immediately, hugged her, and whispered, "Record everything. even if it's audio. We'll choose the day. That night, Grace sent a message to an old friend, Chioma, now working with a Lagos NGO for survivors. I need protocol. I need a safe plan. The reply came quick. I'm with you. Step by step. At Sunday's service, the rumor storm had become a hurricane. The choirs sang, the lights glowed, the screens flashed the church's pristine brand. Pastor David preached on leadership and integrity. Ken stood at the side aisle, headset on, giving signals to the media team like a maestro. When the final amen echoed, a board elder pulled Grace aside. Mummy G, this thing must not scatter us. We're working on an official statement. If Ada can name anyone from outside, some boy, let's handle it quietly. Grace's jaw tightened. And if the person is inside? The elder's eyes skipped past hers. We must protect the mission. Back home, Grace confronted her husband. David, I believe it's your brother. Pastor David stared, then laughed in disbelief that turned to irritation. Grace, stop. He's family. He's helped us build everything. Don't let gossip turn you against your blood. Grace slammed a folder on the table, printouts of Wi-Fi logs, screenshots of camera angles turned away, timestamps matching those nights. David flipped through, face flushing then thinning. This proves nothing criminal, he whispered. Grace stepped closer. Look at me. Look at our daughter. Aisha stood in the doorway, silent, eyes glossy with a pain so old it looked new. David looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, fear slid under his ribs. No one in Lagos plans for truth. They plan for optics. Ken planned perfectly. He took Pastor David to lunch in Lekki, spoke of loyalty, spoke of soldiers who break ranks, spoke of women who forget who fed them. He smiled and left David with the bill and a line, blood is blood. That evening, Grace found her husband in the study, head in his hands. Tell me you believe me, she said. He stayed quiet. Do you remember 3 years ago, she continued, when a choir girl left suddenly? Everyone said she moved to the UK. Did she come to you first? Pastor David's shoulders tensed. Her mother asked for help. She said the girl was uncomfortable around Ken. They had messages, playful things. Nothing illegal. I told them to be careful. We sent her away for school. Grace's breath hitched like a sob. You knew. He looked up, eyes red. I didn't know this. You didn't want to know, she said. The space between them filled with a truth more devastating than accusation. Complicity by convenience. Outside, the city pulsed. Inside, a marriage's foundation cracked with a quiet, terrible sound. Chioma arranged a protocol. Medical check, trauma counselor, legal options, secure copies of the evidence. Move slowly, she advised. He will overplay his hand. Grace installed a second camera in the hallway and gave Aisha a small panic button linked to a phone app. 2 nights later, opportunity arrived wrapped in arrogance. Pastor David left for a minister's retreat. Ken returned home early for a conference call. Around 10 p.m., he tapped on Aisha's door. Open. We need to talk. Aisha's fingers trembled over the app. Grace stood behind the corridor wall, phone recording. The door opened a crack. 5 minutes, Ken whispered. You don't get to control me, Aisha said, voice low. He chuckled. I already did. He pushed the door wider to step in and froze. Grace stepped into the frame. Say that again, she said. He straightened, mask slipping into something colder. Grace, you're making a small family matter into war. She lifted her phone. It's already war. He leaned closer, voice dropping. If you push this, I will burn this church down around your family. I will leak every financial conversation, every private fight. Pastor survive on image. I am your image. The camera caught every word. Ken felt it then, power tipping away. He tried to recover, shrugging. You won't do it, he said. You can't ruin your own home. Grace's reply was steady. You already did. The next morning, Grace sent the recording to Chioma and to a lawyer. She did not send it to the board. Not yet. She called Pastor David. Come home. When he arrived, tired and hollow, Grace played the clip. He watched, then sank into a chair, a man punched by his own reflection. "I'll handle it," he said finally. "No," Grace answered. "We'll handle it." They set conditions. Ken would be confronted with counsel present. Aisha would not be in the room. The lawyer would ask questions. If Ken threatened, they would proceed with a police report. David looked at his wife, seeing not the soft poise of public Sundays, but iron. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Grace didn't accept or reject it. She moved to protect her daughter. An hour later, Ken walked into the living room, smile already in place. The lawyer introduced himself, placed a recorder on the table, and asked direct questions. Ken dodged, grinned, politicized. Then the lawyer pressed play. Ken watched himself threaten the family. Something feral flashed behind his eyes. "You think anyone will believe her?" he spat. "A girl who hides? A woman protecting her 40-year-old marriage? Please." The lawyer paused the audio. "This is not about belief. This is about pattern." He placed printed screenshots of other messages, old ones recovered from cloud backups Chioma's tech assistant had guided them through. Ken stood abruptly. "This meeting is over." He reached for the recorder. Pastor David stopped him. "Sit." The word carried a decade of authority. Ken sat. For the first time, he looked small. News in Lagos moves like Danfo buses, loud, fast, and in every direction. Before the family could file the report, a gossip blog posted a tip naming a celebrity as Aisha's baby father. The church PR team pounced, crafting denials, drafting a soft pity narrative around a naive girl misled by city boys. Grace shut it down. "We will not throw another man to the wolves to save a wolf in our house." Pastor David looked at her, then nodded. In a private meeting, he told the board, "We have a serious internal matter. We are reporting to the authorities." The room went still. A wealthy donor cleared his throat. "Are you sure? Court cases can take years. Media will feast. The mission will suffer." David, voice graveling, said, "The mission was corrupted when we chose silence over safety." Ken was placed on sabbatical. He left the compound in a storm of disbelief and rage, threatening group chats and calling allies. That night, someone keyed Pastor David's car. Anonymous numbers rang Grace's phone with hissed warnings. Aisha curled up on her bed, one hand on her belly, the other on her mother's wrist. "Will people hate us?" she asked. Grace smoothed her hair. "Some will. More will understand." Outside, rain began to fall, cleansing and loud. Grace welcomed the sound. Ken didn't fold. He counterattacked. He leaked bank screenshots, hinted at secret accounts, accused Grace of witch hunting, language designed to inflame, to distract. The church trended for all the wrong reasons. Members demanded transparency. Hush meetings were held in Lecky lounges and in SUVs. Meanwhile, the case file moved, slow but steady. A brave former choir member, now in the UK, agreed to send a statement about Ken's old messages. Another usher, newly married, came forward anonymously. A pattern emerged. Still, Aisha's single question haunted the house. What if everyone chooses him? Grace answered by building small certainties. Doctor's appointments kept, meals eaten, sunlight on the balcony, short walks when the evening breeze returned. One afternoon, Aisha watched children chase a football outside the compound gate and whispered, "I want my child to run in light." Grace squeezed her hand. "Then we will turn on every light we can." Pastor David apologized publicly for leadership failures, stepping down temporarily. That drew both scorn and respect. At night he sat on the floor of Aisha's room, eyes rimmed red, and said, "I should have protected you." Aisha listened, gripping the edges of forgiveness like a rail, not ready to lean her weight on it, but not letting go either. The board demanded a family forum, closed, of course. Grace walked in with a simple folder. No theatrics, no tears. She played the audio again, laid out the logs, summaries of statements, and the NGO's procedural letter. She didn't preach. She didn't beg. She let the room hear the quiet machinery of power exposed. A senior deacon, known for his political fence-sitting, finally exhaled. "We can't cover this." Another, eyes wet, said, "We covered it before." Pastor David nodded, shame and relief crossing his face like shadows. The board voted to cooperate fully with an independent review and the police. Ken's allies stormed out, phones already lifted to call their networks. But something had shifted, not just in the room, in the story. The church's brand had lost its sheen, but had gained a spine. That night, Aisha lay awake, baby turning gently, and felt something inside her unlock, tiny, delicate, like a latch opening on a window that had been jammed for months. Air flowed in. Ken was arrested on a weekday afternoon, quietly, without sirens, after the investigators finished their questions. Grace found out via a text from Chioma. "They've picked him up." She didn't smile. She sat on the edge of the bed and prayed, not in the way the church had taught her to perform, but in the plain language of mothers. "Let my child be safe." Outside, Lagos traffic bellowed. Inside, Aisha stood at the mirror, touched the curve of her belly, and whispered to the life there, "We are okay." That evening, Pastor David announced to a stripped-down midweek service that the church would pause all major programs. He offered counseling sessions, opened the building to survivors' workshops, and asked to be held accountable. Some applauded. Some left quietly. Some muttered that the enemy is at work. Grace didn't listen to any of it. She curled up with Aisha on the sofa, the TV on mute, city lights blinking through the blinds like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. In the silence, Aisha said, "Mommy, what if I tell my story myself?" Grace looked at her. "When you're ready, we'll choose the platform." When Aisha chose to speak, she didn't pick a pulpit or a press conference. She chose a camera in the living room at midday, windows open, no ring light gloss. The video lasted 12 minutes. She didn't name details beyond what was already legal. She talked about silence, about fear in the corridors, about the weight of being the perfect symbol in a church built on appearance. "I kept quiet to protect people who didn't protect me," she said. "I thought telling the truth would break our family. It just exposed what was already broken." She ended with a steady breath. "To anyone in a house of silence, light exists. Open one window." They uploaded it with the lawyer's approval and Chioma's guidance. It spread, not as scandal, but as signal. Messages poured in, "Me too. I thought it was my fault. Thank you." Of course there was hate. There's always hate. But the girl who had curled around her pain now held the microphone. And in Lagos, when a woman holds the mic and refuses to waver, the city listens, even if half of it grumbles. Aisha gave birth on a soft, rainy morning in a modest private hospital in Ikoyi, chosen for discretion and care, not for marble floors. Grace held her hand. Pastor David stood near the window, hands shaking. When the baby cried, the sound was a clean bell through months of fog. Aisha laughed and sobbed at once, touching 10 perfect fingers. She named him Kim, my own. Later, in the hush of the room, Pastor David asked if he could hold his grandson. Aisha nodded. He cradled the child and whispered, "I will build differently." Grace watched them and felt a strangeness, grief and hope, holding hands like uneasy friends. Outside, rain braided the city into a softer version of itself. Ken's case crawled forward, then quickened as more statements anchored it. The church rebuilt slowly, fewer lights, more listening. A survivors fund was created in Aisha's child's name, not for publicity, but because that is what rebuilding should look like. In the quiet of the night, Aisha wrote a letter she would never send. "You did not win. You only taught me how to fight." Months later, on a bright Sunday with harmattan sharpening the light, Aisha walked into the church with Kim on her hip and Grace by her side. There were stares, there always would be, but there were also nods, women with eyes that said, "I see you." The service was different now. Fewer fog machines, more plain words. Pastor David didn't return to preaching like a general. He moderated like a man learning. He owned what he had failed to do. He invited an external counselor to speak on boundaries, power, and consent. It was not perfect. Some still left. Some still gossiped. Lagos never runs out of both. But a shape of newness settled over the room, the kind born not from hype, but from humility. After service, a teenager from the choir approached Aisha, shaky. I told my auntie. She believed me. Aisha hugged her. Good. That evening, Victoria Island's skyline burned orange. Grace and Aisha sat on the balcony, the city loud and alive below. What's our lesson? Aisha asked, voice small but steady. Grace looked at her daughter, at the baby sleeping between them. Image can be polished, she said. Truth can only be lived. Protecting reputation at the cost of the vulnerable is not faith, it's fear. Aisha nodded. In silence, she added, is a house that looks beautiful until you smell the smoke. They sat there, letting the breeze run through the open window they had forced wide, determined to keep it that way. And so, what began as a family's silent shame turned into a storm that shook an entire church to its core. But here's the real question. How many secrets are still buried in places we least expect, hidden behind smiles and titles? If you were Grace, would you have had the courage to break the silence, even if it meant losing everything? Don't just scroll away. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button if this story moved you. And subscribe for more powerful stories that will keep you thinking long after the video ends.